Welcome to the Stories with Traction podcast. I'm your host, Matt Zaun. Thank you for joining us as we uncover how stories are one of the most important aspects of your business. We'll talk about struggles, victories, and how you can utilize strategic storytelling to inspire those around you to action. Enjoy this episode. Anyone that knows me knows how passionate I am about storytelling. A big part of that is because I've seen time and time again organizations that really implement strategic storytelling win. But often in the business world, there's this perception that some leaders get regarding storytelling. They envision friends at a campfire. It's not exactly what we're talking about when we're talking about storytelling. That may be a piece of it, conversational, vocal storytelling. But another big piece is the digital marketing regarding storytelling. How does your organization utilize digital marketing to share your stories? Today, we're going to focus on that because today we have Tom Armitage, the digital marketing playmaker. Welcome to the show, Tom.
Appreciate it, Matt. Really excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited you're here too, because I've been following you for quite some time on social media, and I feel like you have been throwing out a ton of wisdom regarding how people can really tap in to digital marketing. And as you know, digital marketing has changed over the years. I feel that companies need to be more creative, more innovative than ever before to get above the noise. And that goes back to how they can really share these stories. So I want to dive in and uncover a lot of different things that I've learned from you over the last year that I've been following you on social media, but I really want my audience to really understand different things that you do and how they could be thinking about how to make their digital marketing game better. So I'm really interested to dive in and to go from there. But I want to start out by something very, very simple, because again, we think in pictures. So I think when people have the concept of digital marketing in their mind, there's a different picture that comes up. And I feel like that the pictures are different for everyone. So can you set the groundwork for us and just tell us in your mind, what is digital marketing?
That's an awesome question. I think I posed this question a few months back on LinkedIn. And by the way, it feels like we're two long lost friends that are finally coming together to meet because we've been connected on LinkedIn for so long. But I think there's digital marketing still is a bit of a mystery for a lot of people just because it includes so much. And everyone has different experiences, comes from different places, and different organizations probably define it differently. So depending on where they work, they could have a different definition. And I think the unfortunate truth is that a lot of people use digital marketing as a synonym with just pay-per-click advertising, right? So just Google ads, Amazon ads, Facebook ads, whatever their paid program looks like, that tends to be how they define digital marketing. Sometimes for someone that's a little more advanced, they might group SEO, search engine optimization, also into that bucket. But you and I know, and probably a lot of the listeners know, that digital marketing does include those things, but includes much more than just that. And it's really all encompassing for everything that includes building your brand, whether that's a personal brand or your company's brand, promoting your products and your services, engaging your customer service team, your sales team, your marketing team, and bringing them all together. And then, of course, all of those tactics and those components that allows folks to learn about you, drive them to the site, educate them, have them engage in consideration, research, and ultimately buy, and then re-engage with them after purchase. So it's hard to even define that succinctly because digital marketing includes all of those components.
So I appreciate you mentioned that regarding all the different elements of digital marketing, because you're right. I think people have a very, very narrow, very, very like surfacey level understanding of digital marketing. And as you know, it's much, much, much deeper. Now, one of the things I want to pose to you, and I really want to get your feedback on this, is I feel like there's a lot of business leaders. So I want you to think CEOs, executives, individuals that run the company, that they're not thinking enough about digital marketing. They push it to other individuals in their organization. But as leaders, I almost feel that they should be more cognizant of what's happening in the digital marketing space, because that's their brand. That's the messages that they're putting out. So if you think of like a brick and mortar type building, if that building had a major issue, the leader of that organization would probably figure out a way to step up. And though they would tie in other people with his or her team, they would make that a priority. And I feel like a lot of CEOs out there, a lot of leaders don't make it a priority to really focus on their digital marketing strategy. So is that your experience as well? And if so, what would you challenge CEOs and executives out there that aren't really paying enough attention to it to do?
Yeah, I think that is 100% the experience that I've encountered over the years with a lot of these type of audience members. And it's crazy too, because when there's budget cuts, we know it's like the famous saying that marketing tends to have their budget cut first when there's profitability issues, right? And numbers aren't being reached. But if anything, that should be the last thing cut, because that's what's going to ultimately drive sales, drive purchases, and really drive that profitability back into the company. And if a business leader does not have their pulse on what's going on from promotion, storytelling, customer service, sales, if all of these things, if you treat all of these things as being, commingling with one another and being all integrated and working with one another, then it makes absolutely no sense that the CEO or the business leader shouldn't have an idea of what's going on a daily basis for these types of programs. And if you think of digital marketing holistically, from website and the experience that a customer might have, social media, the very first touch point that they have with your company, and all of the remaining touch points thereafter, as you inch them towards a purchase and after the purchase, then of course the CEO and the leaders of the company should understand what's going on and play a role in what that process looks like.
Yeah, so I appreciate you mentioning that as well. I think it's an extremely valuable point. And my challenge to everyone listening to this is to really start paying attention to the messages you're putting out there, to figure out, is it really sharing the stories that you want? Is the user experience there that you would be proud of? Because I feel often a lot of leaders aren't really understanding the user process as well. One of the things that you talk about quite often is making data-driven decisions, right? So you have clients going on to these different channels. They're providing the organization with different data points. And from the top-down approach, the leaders of that organization should understand what their clients want, right? That we have data at our fingertips that could really help in changing different decisions. So can you talk a little bit about the data-driven decisions that you've seen in the digital marketing space, not only now in the present moment, but where you see that going in the future?
Yeah, we lean on what we call the ROC principle, ROC, ROC standing for roadmap, just another word for strategy. Just kind of made more sense to call it roadmap because rock sounds better than sock. So we have the roadmap. O stands for ongoing work and ongoing analysis. And then C stands for being customer centric. So ROC. And I think it's a really good model that we've built. And it ties really strongly to your question about data-driven decision-making. Obviously, your strategy needs to be put in place first, so you understand what you're doing, you understand your budgets, you understand your tactics, you understand what your team members working on, their roles and the responsibilities, and you can hold people accountable for the work that they've set out to do. The ongoing part is really important because that's where analysis comes into play. First of all, you're accepting the fact that anything in digital marketing, anything in PR, anything in communications is going to take time. There's really no short-term wins. Like everything is a long-term investment in this world, especially today, because there's so many touch points that are needed in order to make a sale. So just the fact that you're accepting the fact that it needs to be an ongoing program instead of a short, one-off type of project is there's beauty in just accepting that first off. And then the second part is that this ongoing analysis that needs to take place on a quarterly basis, on a monthly basis to help you make those decisions is very valuable, because now you're not operating blindly. You're not making decisions based on a whim or based on your gut or based on what the CEO thinks is cool. You're making decisions based on that analysis, and it's less risk, and there's more of a guarantee that it's going to be the right decision as you pivot, as you shift, as you optimize. And then 3 is the C, which is being customer centric. You need to understand your personas. You need to understand your target audience as you're building that strategy, as you're conducting this ongoing analysis. So that way you're always talking to the right people and the right audience, and you're making those decisions both based on the historical analysis and based on the personas and what they want and what they need for that product, that service that you're selling.
All right, so let's do a rundown of the ROC. So we have ROC, roadmap, ongoing, customer centric.
Yes.
So I have a very good friend who I'm actually excited. He will be on the podcast in a little bit, Josh Rudiger.
Nice.
I consider him a marketing genius. Basically, he did wonders for the organization that he works for, and it's amazing. He did exactly the approach that you're talking about. So he is incredible when it comes to digital marketing, but the company that he became a part of, they were still utilizing a lot of archaic marketing practices. So he got on board, and he immediately established a roadmap back to what you're talking about regarding strategy. And he got a ton of buy-in from the leadership of the organization. Now, what was amazing for him regarding the ongoing communications with leadership was that they were seeing results beyond what they ever experienced before because of that power of the marketing. So back to your point regarding a lot of companies like to cut. So when you think of 2020, when the world was falling apart in April of 2020, a lot of these marketing campaigns started to get cut. And then once it reset, a lot of companies were in trouble because they were pushing that off too much, and now they have to play catch up. Well, he basically took the company through that very challenging time through digital marketing. And basically back to the customer centric, they were able to really extract these data points out to really focus on what their customers wanted. And he did an unbelievable job. So I really like while you were saying that, I'm thinking of the different things that he shared with me. And I'm just envisioning someone that had to inspire leadership right out of the gate of this is what we need to focus on, but was seeing those ongoing results, had those conversations, and really was able to show it through data. And now, I mean, he's responsible for bringing in an astronomical amount of business because of the digital marketing. That's the power of what we're talking about here. So I really appreciate you mentioning that.
Yeah, I think that understanding your target audience seems so simple, so logical, and companies sometimes feel like they have a good understanding of who their current customers are. But if they haven't gone through a formal process, they haven't gone through formal market research, depth interviews, those key steps involved in actually building true buyer personas, then they might be missing really the finer details that leads you to the right keywords that you're going after. If you have your SEO strategy in place, to the right targeting parameters, if you have a paid program in place, to the right way that you're producing videos or writing your copy, if you're doing content marketing. So all of these things sit on the cornerstone of understanding your target audience. And even companies that think that they've established their personas right probably haven't, and they're wasting a lot of time, money, and resources in producing all of this content and doing all this marketing and promotional work, when really it's I don't want to say falling on deaf ears. It's probably reaching some people and some people in their audience, but certainly they're not getting their biggest bang for their buck.
All right. So what you said, I don't want it to be missed because I think it is unbelievably important. So you talked about the customer centric, right? A lot of times there's a disconnect between who our audience is. So one of the things that I've talked about numerous times, but again, it's worth highlighting, is the ICA, ideal client avatar. So one of the things that I did months ago was I developed an unbelievably clear ideal client avatar. So for everyone listening, thinking, all right, what is that? How in depth is this? This can go as in depth as you want. And it's something that I highly recommend because it's fundamentally changed my business. And it really links into what you're talking about, Tom, regarding really being that customer centric. So my ideal client avatar because I primarily work with CEOs between 45 and 65 years of age, I start going deeper. Okay, so I'm envisioning, so my ideal client avatar has a name. His name's Bob. Bob is a 60-year-old man that runs an organization. Bob has 2 children. Both these children are either finishing up college or they're going into grad school. Bob really, really enjoys watching sports movies and war movies. Why does that matter? Well, it matters because to me, when I backtrack and I think about every client I've worked with in the last 2 years, 99% of them have children. It's very rare that I work with a client that doesn't have children. Why is that worth me taking note of? Because for people that follow me on social media, I talk about my kids all the time. And I do it utilizing like through story, but utilizing business principles. The reason why I'm doing that, one, it builds trust because I'm not just some dude on social media posting stuff.
Right.
Now they know I'm a family man. But in addition, I'm speaking my customer's language. So it goes back to your point about being customer centric because they're dealing with different things regarding their children. There's things their kids do that make them excited, make them angry, that they're fearful of. So I'm utilizing those stories through business principles to connect with them. That's the power of what you're talking about. It's going to transcend all of the messages I have out there because I realize if 99% of my clients have children, I'd almost be a fool not to talk about my kids. Is that tied into what you're talking about, Tom, regarding being customer centric?
Yeah, exactly. We have personas that we built out on behalf of our company, SiteSeeker, as well. I'll just give a shout out to one of them, which is Mason, the marketing manager. Right, he's often the decision maker at a medium-sized company, and he's the one that will ultimately decide on which marketing agency his company is going to be working with. And we have that profile built out, just like you had mentioned. You know, his age, gender, his education, how long he's been in the industry, how long he's been at this particular company, what publications he reads, what podcasts he listens to, what he likes to do in his spare time. All of those finer details makes a big difference. If you're unfamiliar with marketing, if you're unfamiliar with the usefulness of buyer personas, and you read this profile, and it reads a little bit like a novel, at least before you get into the targeting part of it, you might be saying, this is silly. This doesn't make any sense. But if you're able to connect that to the power of storytelling and why these little tidbits of information matter, then you have a whole newfound appreciation for market research, buyer personas, digital marketing, digital storytelling, all of the things that we're talking about here today, and all the things that we talk about on a daily basis in the digital marketing space.
Yeah, and this is to highlight the power of this again. This is what really changed the game for me, because when I had mentioned my ideal client avatar, who's Bob, this individual is an unbelievably successful human being, right? This person has had tremendous success in the business space. So 99% of my clients have. They've done incredible things in the business space. And one of the things that I noticed is they wanted to do more. They've been so successful. Now they're focused on how they can build a legacy that's a generational legacy. So why does that matter? Well, it matters to me because I actually not changed gears, but I added an additional layer to what I've been talking about, which is corporate social responsibility. I didn't start talking about CSR until late 2021. But now I'm talking about it all the time. The reason is because a lot of my clients wanted to go deeper. They wanted to figure out how do they position their stores to not only help their company, but also help the community. And a lot of them were so into different things they were doing in the nonprofit space. They serve as board members of nonprofits, that I added that into my stories and I added that into my digital marketing. And now I have an entire service that I provide regarding corporate social responsibility workshops. But that all came back to me really focusing on the C of the rock that you had mentioned, that customer centric, because I didn't realize that was a need until I really was hearing it over and over again from the clients that I was serving. So I really appreciate you mentioning that. I think people should really sit down and they should start thinking about this more. And I would recommend they do this regularly. I mean, it's going to depend on your industry on how regular. I don't think it needs to be a weekly or monthly thing, but I think at least quarterly to sit down and say, okay, has the persona changed? What are people dealing with right now culturally? What's happening that's on the forefront of these people's minds? Because that's going to really change what you're putting out there from a messaging perspective. So do you recommend people think about this on a regular basis? If so, what time frame would you recommend they be cognizant of this?
Yeah, they absolutely need to be revisited regularly. I would say the business leaders probably don't need to be involved as often as the worker bees, the performers, those that are actually doing the work. So the leaders probably can stay out of it. In a formal capacity, probably every few years they should be formally revisited and revised. But those on the execution team, those on the operations team, whatever you call it within your particular organization, they should be constantly looking at these personas and understanding if there's slight changes that need to be made, because they're the ones that are in the trenches, actually hitting the keys on the keyboard when they're in Facebook ads, when they're doing their keyword research with their keyword analysis tools, when they're producing their videos and writing their scripts for their podcasts and for their videos and video blogs. Like, as you're doing that work, you need to be constantly looking at these personas, and making sure that they're as accurately as possible, and making slight modifications to them through your learnings, through your measurement, through your findings. So that way they're always constantly up to date. And the final thing I want to point out about this is that sometimes when we do these persona processes, the business leaders think that the customer is one person, and in actuality, in the real life situation, it's somebody totally different. And that disconnect is very, very important to understand, because maybe your ideal customer profile is the one that the business leader wants it to be. And if that's the case, that's fine. But the marketing needs to understand that and needs to be going after who that ICP is. And if it's the other way around, if the reality is that it's somebody different, then somebody's got to alert that business leader, because they're going to be in for a rude awakening that the core audience is very different than who they think it is as the person running the company.
So it's a really good point. And I can only imagine how frustrating that could be to a business leader that wants to target a very specific person, and then they find out it's not helping sales whatsoever because that's not what their customers want. So that's a very, very important point. What's the best way to shift once that happens? I mean, if there's a lot of companies out there that their entire digital marketing strategy is off because they want to target someone. Where do they start regarding revamping their marketing? Do they change products and services because that's who they really want to focus on, or is it really back to the digital marketing strategy on they just need to change their messaging?
Yeah, I think it's the digital marketing strategy. If you've revised the strategy and you've made a concerted effort for quite some time around trying to target this new profile, maybe at that point you have to revisit what your actual product is. But that's certainly secondary to the digital marketing. You should be able to control who the buyer is through the right digital marketing program and the right use of storytelling and the right positioning of your product and the right branding, right? These things are able to, the word manipulate is coming to mind. I know that's normally a negative connotation, but persuade, let's use the word persuade. Digital marketing should be able to persuade the right audience in buying your product or service. You shouldn't necessarily have to change your product or service if it's done right. But that disconnect is definitely important to understand. We worked with one client where it was 80% female buyers between the ages of 25 and 34. And, they had 1 to 2 children. They were married. They were younger. They weren't middle-aged just yet. And it was a good audience, but it wasn't sustainable for long-term buying power. We needed the males. And by understanding and documenting how lopsided it was between female and male in age, we had to put a marketing program in place to try and target the 35 to 54-year-old male audience that had just as much, if not more, buying power, depending on the geographical location that we were targeting for these programs. And we had to make a concerted effort to try and go after this crowd, because it was simply not sustainable with having such a finely tuned niche audience that was our buyer at the time.
Yeah, that's extremely important for people to recognize. So I'm very happy that you mentioned that, because it's something that everyone should be constantly thinking of. Is this going to relate? Is this going to connect to my customer? So I do want to shift gears a little bit, because I think that this is becoming a reoccurring theme in our culture, and I just want to get your perspective on it, especially being in your space.
Sure.
So the pendulum has swung, obviously, in the last couple of years, where we've pulled away from in person and we've gone full-fledged digital. Right? No one saw what was going to happen at the end of 2019, swinging to being so virtual and so digital. But now I feel like there's a lot of pushback happening. So I want to talk about that more. Is I see and I hear people saying, I'm zoomed out. I don't want to do webinars anymore. I feel like a lot of people are their priorities and their perspectives have changed. So they're unsubscribing from different things. Minimalism has really taken root, I think, in our culture, where it's liberating to people. It's freeing. So a lot of people they're deleting apps. They're more cognizant of their screen time when it comes to being on their phones. So where is a happy medium? Where's the balance in this? Do you think that this is just a result of where we've gone as a society, where now we're getting, people are stiff arming this, and eventually it's going to be this almost harmonious in person and digital? Or do you think people are going to have more of a need to be in person, and they're going to be getting away from digital? What are your thoughts regarding what the future holds for digital marketing?
Yeah, I think there's likely going to be some sort of hybrid happy medium, in my opinion. We know that there's going to be a crowd that will probably continue to be a bit hesitant with in-person events, and that might be here to stay, right? A small portion of the population, or medium portion, depending on probably your geographical area. But there's equally as much, maybe not more, people chomping at the bit to continue getting back to quote unquote normal and participating in in-person events once again. And if there's a population out there that really has been stifled and hasn't had that human connection, that human touch in a few years, I think this next upcoming year, or maybe it'll be the year after, I think in-person events are probably going to pop off, and there's going to be a lot of people that are really looking to get back to pre-COVID days of shaking someone's hand and raising a glass or having a drink at the bar with them, and doing good old-fashioned networking is what I'll call it. Now, the other component of the hybrid is, I think, that we as organizations have gotten much more comfortable with virtual tools, and we've been forced to learn software that we didn't have to use before. And that just isn't the 22-year-old person that just graduated college. That is the 65-year-old business owner who didn't have a need to participate in a webinar or use Zoom regularly, or all these tools that are now ubiquitous with today's day and age and today's normal business operation. I think we've all been forced to get much more familiar and comfortable with these digital tools, and will continue to be using them. So I think there'll be in-person events getting back to taking place, and companies will still find value from those, but they'll also need to have a lot of these digital tools in their belt that they can use, and they should be using, in order to best reach their audience the way that they want to be reached.
So I feel like there are knee-jerk reactions a lot of times when it comes to individuals in positions of leadership with businesses. So a prime example is what happened in the beginning of 2020. A lot of companies who really were hesitant of going virtual, allowing their team members to even work from home, now we're forced to do that. So there was a surge of creativity, of innovation. How do we do this? I mean, what an awesome way to spur on this digital explosion, right? And it was forced. But now, believe it or not, I'm hearing from a lot of companies, we're not doing anything digital anymore. We're focusing on in person. So now it's like swung so far where now a lot of the marketing strategies is to go to conferences and to do in-person networking events because their people are hungry for it. And again, it's the knee-jerk reaction of, oh, we need to win the talent war. This is what our people are screaming out for. But then at the same time, there needs to be something that focuses on where are we going as a culture, right? Like we can't just push off digital. So I think it's going to get to a point where you're talking this happy medium. And I think business leaders need to be really cognizant of that there is a way to be creative in our new world. There is a way to utilize numerous channels that we didn't have access to before. Like hybrid events, I think are here to stay. I think we've given people the option of viewing something from the comfort of their own home. So even with in-person things coming back, I see a new wave of people understanding how to utilize the hybrid and being not only good at it, but great at it. So like from a sales, from a speaking perspective, if your people can't do hybrid events, they need to focus on it because it's not going away. And I've seen a big hiccup, a lot of people messing up that they're not focused on how to communicate in these hybrid situations, but it's not going anywhere. So do you have any tips for people that still want to embrace, digital marketing with everything that you said, everything at the beginning? You said all these different things regarding digital marketing, but also recognizing their people are starving to get back out in person, go to these in-person conferences, go to these in-person workshops. Do you have any tips for how people can be thinking about this from a strategical perspective?
Yeah, I attended a trade show a couple of weeks ago. It was in Orlando, Florida, and there was 1,900 in attendance. It was a relatively niche trade show, but that was one of the biggest ones that they've ever had, right? Coming out of 2 years where some people probably skipped, one was canceled and some people probably skipped out on last year's since it was kind of right in the midst of us starting to get over the hump, and then we kind of humped the other way, right? So it was wild to shake hands with people and just feel the energy in the room, during the keynotes, at the bar afterwards, on the trade show floor, of people that they were seeing their friends in the industry. They were seeing people. I was seeing people that I had networked with on LinkedIn for 2 years for the very first time in person. And that was a really cool experience. And I think that we got away from it for a while there. And I think that people really enjoyed that in-person touch again. And that's why I think that regardless of how you feel the situation and regardless of where your politics lie with COVID, you need to have an in-person strategy, or you need to have in-person as part of your strategy moving forward, because there is people that are going to be meeting and wanting and are going to be getting value from those in-person conferences, trade shows, events, whatever it is that makes sense for your business and for the way that you conduct marketing. So that aside, now let's focus on the digital side. I think that there's definitely changes that have taken place. Your webinar out comment. So I've been talking about webinars the past couple days on LinkedIn, and I got my email coming out, my February email to my list that's specifically on Our People webinar out. Our webinar is really dead. And the feedback I got from the post a couple of days ago was absolutely awesome. It allowed me to turn it into kind of a longer story and a longer concept. And the fact of the matter is, they're not dead. They just got misused by a lot of people. They got misused by a lot of companies that were using them strictly as a means to get people's names on a list to hard sell them later. That was the number one complaint from the feedback I received. There was a lot of fluffy topics and fluffy webinars that you realize companies were doing a webinar just because they thought that was what they needed to be doing. We didn't have our 3 trade shows, so we have to do 6, 7 webinars this year, and they weren't putting the same type of energy and effort into the webinars that they did with trade shows. So there was fluffy topics, no value. People would give up an hour and a half of their day for little to no new information. And I think that people are burned out because of the abuse and the misuse of webinars. But webinars themselves still have a tremendous amount of value if you're doing them properly. You have a good topic, you have a good host, good audio, good video. You keep it short, succinct, useful information. You follow up, ask if they need any information. There's a lot of best practices that I've identified that other people have identified, and they're going to be using webinars strategically and deliberately, and they're going to actually make an impact with that particular tactic. And they're not just going to write it off because the new buzzword is that webinars are dead. And the last thing I'll mention is on-demand content is really important. You mentioned people are wanting to digest and consume content on their own time because we're now living in this virtual world and no commute times and work from home. And we've gotten so used to just this on-demand concept. So making sure that your podcasts are recorded and are on the different channels where they consume podcasts, having YouTube versions of their webinars so they can go back and watch it at 1.5, 2 times the speed at their own convenience. All these different ways to repurpose it in the ways that our audience wants to consume it and not the way that we're forcing them to consume it.
So what you're saying is extremely important. I want to challenge people to really focus on history for a moment so we can start to uncover what's ahead. So when we look at history, when we look at past pandemics, back to your point of there's this massive surge of people coming back into the community, wanting to be live in person, they don't want to feel isolated anymore. They want to connect. One of the biggest things on numerous surveys before COVID even happened was there's more loneliness and isolation than ever before. And that was being said in 2018 and 2019 before COVID even hit, right? So now you're going to start to see more and more of what you had said, Tom, in-person trade shows, in-person conferences, in-person workshops and keynotes, and all that's going to come back, and I think going to come back with a vengeance. But I think it goes back to what you had said regarding the roadmap, the strategy. How do you tie all this together with the digital space as well to offer back to the customer centric, to offer more options to your customers than ever before? So my challenge to everyone is really think about that roadmap, not just have that knee-jerk reaction on, oh, we're going to focus on in-person, so we're going to send all our sales reps to all these in-person events now. What's the strategy behind it? If you're doing that, what story are you sharing in that moment, in that experience that you can connect to the digital space? Because I don't think anyone is in disagreement that the virtual is not going away ever, right? It's not going to happen. There's going to be digital marketing. There's going to be a virtual presence. We need to figure out a way to have these two worlds coexist and do it well. So I appreciate you mentioning that. I think there's so many awesome concepts to unpack in this conversation. The roadmap, do they have a strategy? Having these ongoing conversations about the difference between in-person and digital marketing. And then also the customer centric. I think that's, in my opinion, that's the biggest takeaway that I'm going to take from this conversation is the messages being shared. Is it truly connecting with my customers, my clients, and moving the needle? Am I going to get buy-in from these messages? So I really appreciate you mentioning that, Tom.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely a hefty topic, and we could probably take it in a lot of different ways. But tying it specifically to digital marketing is you are going to need to have both an in-person and a virtual/digital component to your marketing program, because that's what your audience is most likely demanding, depending on what your buyer personas are. But in most cases, there needs to be a hybrid approach because you need to make sure that you're reaching them and interacting with them how they're demanding. And that's just the nature of where we are today and where we're going to be in the next few years.
And it's super convenient, right, to have both options. People can utilize it from the comfort of their own home. So again, being that customer centric, how can you streamline the buying process? How can you make it as easy as humanly possible for your customers? So Tom, I want to thank you for your time today. I mean, I think there's been invaluable. I think there are a lot of nuggets that I personally got out of it. I know I need to go revamp a lot of stuff myself. So thank you so much. Before we close out, I want to make sure that people are able to connect with you based on this conversation. So if something was said that really speaks to someone listening to this, where's the best place that they could reach out to you?
Sure. If you want more information about me and my company, it's site-seeker.com, SITE-SEEKER. And if you want to personally connect with me on LinkedIn, I'm always happy to do that. And you can find me on LinkedIn at Thomas J. Armitage will be the fastest way to find me on LinkedIn.
And I will speak to that you post extremely thought-provoking content. It's not just tips and tricks. Like it really has challenged me to reevaluate my digital marketing presence. I appreciate that. So I highly recommend people connect with Tom on LinkedIn. To make it even as convenient as possible, I will include that in the show notes. I'll include the website and your LinkedIn account, Tom, so people could just click and go, and they'll be able to find you very easily. So
Appreciate
thank you
that, Matt.
again.
Thanks.
Absolutely. I appreciate your time, Tom. I really do. And I think you gave a ton of wisdom regarding digital marketing. So thank you again.
Thanks for having me on. And hopefully this conversation will definitely open the eyes and minds of your listeners to thinking about digital marketing a little bit differently.
Thank you for listening to the Stories with Traction podcast. If you have a story that you would like to share, feel free to drop an email to matt@mattzaun.com with the subject line Stories with Traction. Also, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, where I share tons of resources on how you can be a better storyteller. Remember, if you want to persuade with power and inspire those around you to action, you must share more stories.